Today, I want to consider what TED Talks can teach us about designing engaging learning experiences. TED's motto, Ideas Worth Spreading, certainly describes what most teachers aspire to do. We hope to spread ideas ourselves, but more important, we also want to encourage students to discover and express their own ideas. Of course, not everyone is a TED Talk fan. Martin Robbins of the New Statesman has criticized TED Talks for being uncritical, unaccountable, and focused mostly on making audiences feel better about themselves. In a recent study, Shanna Carpenter of Iowa State University found that we only think we learn more from fluent speakers than from less fluent ones. In fact, participants in her study learned about the same, regardless of the speaker's skill. Nevertheless, most of us do find TED Talks engaging, and education journalist Annie Murphy Paul suggests 5 reasons why well-made videos can help us learn. First, they gratify our preference for visual learning. Second, they engage the power of social learning by inspiring robust conversation. The most viewed TED Talk of all time is Ken Robinson's Schools Kill Creativity. With over 17 million views, it's definitely a conversation starter. Third, they put practitioners in the role of teachers, embedding learning in a rich context of stories and experiences. Fourth, they enable self-directed, just-in-time learning. And fifth, they encourage viewers to build on what we already know. Now let's think about what makes classroom PowerPoint presentations not like TED Talks. Beyond the absence of a rapt audience and a jumbotron-sized screen. When teaching, we often use slide presentations to help us convey information. It's a substitute for lecture notes on the board. And for those of us who make our presentation slides available to students to study from later, we're even more inclined to pack them full of information, which unfortunately makes them and us boring. Of course, we also use our slide presentations to encourage classroom interaction, which gives us a one-up on TED Talks, whose tightly scripted performances do not allow for audience participation. Giving a TED Talk is clearly a solo performance, whereas teaching is more like conducting an orchestra of minds. Because we control how we move through our presentation slides, we can stop, elaborate, and ask questions. And if you're like me, you live for that electrifying moment when something a student says leads everyone in the room to see things in a new light. So when we transform classroom slide presentations into online content, how can we do so in a way that maximizes the chance for both engagement and learning? I suggest we start with those strategies of TED Talks that Annie Murphy Paul says foster learning. Be visual, stimulate conversation, share stories and experiences, enable self-directed learning, and build on what students already know. Let's consider just one of those strategies, stories. One thing classroom PowerPoint slides are generally not known for is their ability to facilitate storytelling. Ian Parker, in a New Yorker essay titled Absolute PowerPoint, made this observation. PowerPoint empowers the provider of simple content, but it risks squeezing out the provider of the process, the rhetorician, the storyteller, the poet. The idea that stories are the best way to get people's attention in an information-saturated world is appealing to all sorts of industries. Presentation guru Nancy Duarte put it this way: there is something magical about a story structure that makes it so that when it's assembled, it can be ingested and then recalled by the person that's receiving it. After analyzing a number of famous speeches, including Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream and Steve Jobs' iPhone launch, Duarte found that they all shared a similar structure. They begin with a description of the way things are, and compare that with what could be, making the gap as big as possible. The middle of the speech traverses between what is and what could be, illustrating the resistance that must be overcome and leading to a final call to action, followed by a description of the new bliss that can be achieved if the presenter's big idea is accepted. She also noted that in a presentation, the presenter isn't the hero, the audience is the hero. The role of the presenter is to be the mentor who leads the hero from an ordinary world into a vision of a special world. In other words, Teaching isn't about what we know, it's about fostering knowing in our students, sharing ideas with them in ways that lead them on a quest to know more. So how can we harness the power of stories to help create learning experiences for our students? Obviously, we can tell our own stories or share other stories, like those told in TED Talks. But less obviously, we can organize the information we share to give it the structure of a story, starting with Aristotle's admonition that every story should have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Next, consider organizing your information as feature writers learn to do, by opening with a conflict that is ultimately resolved, or by depicting a problem, then moving toward a solution, or by starting with a present situation, tracing its history, and then forecasting the future. The organizing principle of stories might be described simply as create tension, resolve tension. In the clues to a great story, Andrew Stanton also offers advice that might be helpful for teachers to keep in mind as they think about how to present course content in ways that take advantage of the power of storytelling. Make the audience care. Make a promise from the beginning. Make them work for it. Story is about change. No change, no story. Construct anticipation in your story. Have a clear theme. Stimulate a sense of wonder. Use what you know. Gar Reynolds, who draws from Zen Buddhism for his principles of presentation design, also highlights the value of a story structure. According to Reynolds, your message can be communicated much better if you identify the conflict and the journey to resolve the conflict while making it clear why your audience should care. And caring about ideas, about information, about learning is probably the biggest thing we hope to teach. Stories can help us do that.